Today on Journey to Prophecy.
At the age of 9 years old, I was in a car accident. In this car accident, my mother was going about 60 miles an hour. I fell out the car on the overhead bridge. What should have took my life, I should have died that day. But because of God's grace and His purpose. Life sends us all on a different journey. At birth, my birth was very unexpected because I was born out of a one-night stand. My parents were not expecting for me to come along, but God had other plans. Soon after my birth, a lot of my warfare began. At the age of 7 years old, I received salvation. I remember the church service was going on, and the preacher at the end of the service had called forth and asked everybody to come forth if they wanted prayer. And during this time, we were in the traditional church, and you didn't see many people like just worshiping and praising God out loud. But I remember sitting on the edge of the chair and sitting on the edge of the aisle, and I was looking down the aisle, and it looked like it was so far away. And I started, God began to pull on me. And I got up and I stood there for a few seconds. He was still saying, anybody need prayer, come to the altar. And I made my way down the altar. It's like it was the longest walk. When I got to the front of the altar, I felt the fire of God just rest on me from that early age. I remember just like a sheet matter laid on me. I started wailing and crying and jumping and hollering. And because I was not in a traditional church, they used to call it spells back then. People in the church were saying I was having a spell. They were trying to calm me down, but I knew then that God had rested on my life. I found myself after that day, like going home, like getting on the radio, listening, trying to get as much gospel music in me as possible. I just wanted to hear things that were spiritual mind or spiritual, give me a spiritual connection to God, and music was my source at that point. And because the enemy saw that, that's when my warfare began. At the age of 9 years old, I was in a car accident. In this car accident, my mother was going about 60 miles an hour. I fell out the car on the overhead bridge. What should have took my life, I should have died that day. But because of God's grace and His purpose and the prophecy that was spoken over me from birth, I found that God's grace was sufficient, and He kept me through that. I walked away from that incident just with losing all the skin off my hands. I was in a brace for a long time, and I still got the scar from it now, from hitting my head on the concrete when I first initially came out of the car. I remember looking up under the car, and I could see the 18-wheeler behind me approaching. It was like smoke was going everywhere. So I see my mama trying to stop. She's screaming. She putting on brakes, and she was holding on to my legs trying to keep me from going all the way to the ground. My face was scrubbing the ground, and all I could see was the smoke coming off this 18-wheeler that was right behind us. And I remember after she came to a complete stop, I was laying on the side of the road, and the guy got out the car, and the 18-wheeler was so close I couldn't even see the distance in between my mother's car and the 18-wheeler. And I was just like, Lord, I know. I look back on it, I know that God kept me. My mama talks about it quite often now, saying that how that through that she knew there was God, because she couldn't even get between the 18-wheeler and her car in order to get to the other side, to where I was, to get to the side of the sidewalk. That was one of my first experiences of seeing God's hand move and keep me, and His angels protect me. After that, at the age of 11, I experienced my second incident. I in a vehicle driving, and me and my little nephew, a long time ago, people, it was okay for children to drive at any age. And my stepfather had told me it was okay to go take the trash off. And my nephew got in the car with me, and I, riding down the road, just trying to show off, because I had some of my friends were standing outside, and I was driving the car. And so when I went down to turn around, I ended up going off a ravine going about 50 miles an hour. I went down this ravine and ended up like on the side of a hill. The car was almost, the wheels were up in the air. I remember opening the door, and the pressure, because of so much weight being on the vehicle, the door just slung open. And when it slung open, the car whooped over a little bit. And I remember my nephew just was crying. I grabbed him, I threw him on my back, and we had to climb up the side of the ravine, all the mud, trying to get back to the top. And to make a long story short, when we got back down to the car, and I got somebody to drive me back to my house, and we went back down to the car, and we got there, my mama started screaming and shouting. And I thought she was screaming and shouting because, the car on the side of the thing, and we made it okay. She said, look what's holding up the car. It was literally 2 trees, one at the front wheel and one at the back, about this big around, that were holding the weight of a vehicle up, all those tons up in the air. And my mama just lost her mind, just shouting and giving God glory that he had kept me through that. And I remember the guy that pulled the car from down out the ravine, he said, you should have never got out on the driver's side. He said, those trees weren't supposed to hold it up in the first place. He said, and then on top of that, you got out on the side, this car could have flipped over and killed you and your nephew both. And I look back at it now and didn't understand then that God had a greater purpose and his protection was already all around my life.
Next on Journey to Prophecy.
And this warfare got so intense. I remember taking an overdose for the first time at the age of 13. I took a whole bottle of pill. And that night, I went to bed and I just knew I was gonna die. I knew it. I was like, okay, I'm dying. I'm not gonna wake up in the morning. And I remember the next morning when I heard the alarm clock go off, I was like, I didn't die. I didn't understand how I did not make it through that night. And I had no idea that I was pregnant. No idea that I was pregnant that young. Click the link below and subscribe to our YouTube channel.